What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, you know all that by now, and today I'm going to take you through my top 25 cards in Core Set. Well, there's a lot to go through today, and we don't have much time, so I want to go ahead and get to it, because Core Set, turns out, looks really, really good. Players from all over the spectrum are hailing this as one of the better sets in a long time, which is crazy considering we just had a really good set in Dominaria. So let me go ahead and get down to it, and just like the Sleepers video, which if you haven't seen yet, I'll leave a link in the description down there. Check that video out. But just like the Sleepers video, I'm going to go through some stuff at the lower rarities that I really like first, really quickly here. First of all, I want to point out Gutter Snipe and Goblin Instigator look pretty good for the Goblins deck. Maybe not so much Gutter Snipe, it really depends on how much burn we're playing in that deck, although we are playing some, but Goblin Instigator gets a definite slot in every standard Goblin deck while it's in the format. Also like Elvish Rejuvenator an awful lot, especially for a common. This is nearly guaranteed ramp that gets you whatever land, you know? It doesn't just say basic land. So that's pretty good. Plus it puts a body on the field to chump block for you. There's nothing wrong with that. I like Rejuvenator a lot. But maybe my favorite common in the set, by a lot, is Viashino Pyromancer. This thing looks incredible. It's a source of direct damage when you play it, so it's even good. When you top deck it on like turn 6 or 7, it's fine. It's basically a shock to the face for your opponent, and sometimes a chump blocker or even an attacker if you're still being aggressive. Should also point out that there's horses in this set that I really, really like, especially the black one. Plague Mare looks really, really good. Shield Mare looks awesome. The green one, the hexproof horse, that looks fine too. It's just about all of these horses, save for the blue one, look playable to me. And I want to at least bring them up because they'll at least see some sideboard action. But what is easily my favorite uncommon in the entire set is Militia Bugler. This looks like it's going to do a few things in Standard and maybe even Modern. Just the ability to get you that kind of extra value is really desirable, especially on an uncommon. It's got a decent body for the casting cost and a keyword ability on top of that. But now it's time to actually start the list here with my honorable mentions, because, you know, it's my channel. I always do these. And this time around, there's kind of a lot of them, because my honorable mentions are just all of these narrow answers that we kept seeing throughout spoiler season. Some of these cards will see a little bit more play than others, but I think they'll all see some amount of sideboard play during their life cycles. Alpine Moon is easily the best of these because it hoses Tron for the millionth time. Yes, it does hose Tron. You should know that by now. But Alpine Moon looks really, really good, obviously, and it's going to see all the sideboard play in the world. But there's a bunch more of these. Both Isolate and Infernal Reckoning are one-mana answers to different things in both Modern and Legacy, for that matter. Mistcaller, another very narrow answer card that answers just a few things that are important enough, but does so for 1 mana with relevant creature types. So I think it's still worth bringing up and might get some sideboard play. Another one that I really like is Amulet of Safekeeping. This is decent against Storm in Modern, obviously, and just tokens decks in general, like Lingering Souls decks. So Amulet of Safekeeping, yet another answer that's going to see some sideboard play almost no matter what. But here we go with number 20. We're actually starting the list now, and this one is almost like an honorable mention, to be honest, because I want to bring up 3 cards here, all of which are reprints, which will have probably very minimal standard impact, and they're already good in the formats they're good in. But I just want to point out that it's very important that these 3 cards were reprinted. We got Crucible of Worlds, Scapeshift, and Omniscience in this set, and this list would not be complete without at least pointing out these cards are in the set. Obviously, these cards constitute well over $100 in value when you add them all up. You know, Crucible was like $65, Scapeshift was like $55, Omniscience was at $30, so there's a lot of value printed up in just these 3 cards. Again, I don't see a whole lot of standard play here, and these cards are already good in the decks they were good in other formats. So it's not like these are going to shock the world and change things too much. It's just going to be easier to get the cards for the decks you're already trying to build. But now let's talk about some new stuff. We're going to really start the list, it feels like, with number 19, Liliana Untouched by Death. Well, this is a tribal planeswalker, so in a vacuum it doesn't look super good. It's got to have help from zombies, but obviously it might be able to bring zombies back from the dead. As a matter of fact, it literally can. That's an ability on the card, but can it figuratively resurrect the zombie deck from the dead that was popular in Standard just about a year ago now before the last rotation? It's entirely possible, and I want to jam a bunch of zombies together and see if we can make Liliana work too. Similarly, my number 18 is Sarkin Fireblood. This gets a little bit more points because it looks at least somewhat decent outside of just a Dragon's deck. You know, the 3-mana rate is actually pretty impressive, and I like the +1. Rummaging is just okay, but if you're trying to fill your graveyard, this is a milkshake. This will bring your boys to the yard. That doesn't seem too bad. And getting to see more cards is pretty decent, again, especially on a 3-mana walker. But the other abilities, you know, you gotta be running dragons to make those any good. But obviously, there's definitely ways to break that second ability. You know, even if you don't drop a land on turn 4, you still get a Glorybringer, which is pretty decent. That's something to write home about. And if you do drop your land on turn 4, you can get any number of 6-drop big, you know, flying red dudes. So it seems decent, but to really maximize the value of this Planeswalker, you're going to have to be playing it in a Dragon's deck, which I think, just like Liliana, drags down the playability just a little bit. But ironically, after Sarkin, my number 17 is a dragon. It's the first of these legendary elder dragons that's going to be on this list. It's Palladium Moors. I really like this card a lot. I know there's some people dumping on it, but to be honest, man, hexproof until it does damage is a really good ability. It's kind of a lava axe, you know, it's going to do some damage if you set things up right. And then, even if they can kill it once it loses its hexproof, you can just reanimate it with a Liliana or any other number of reanimation spells. We got a lot of them in just standard. Plus, you can blink it in a couple of different ways. You can just return it to your hand in response to removal with something like Blink of an Eye or Unsummon. There's a couple of different ways to abuse this card by effectively resetting the hexproof and getting another 6 damage in. That's really something you want to pay attention to. A 6/6 flyer with other abilities and an effective form of hexproof. I don't see why people think that's a bad card. Looks pretty good to me. But my number 16 is the first of a bunch of tribal creatures that we're going to see on this list, and honestly, I couldn't tell which creature I wanted to put at number 16, either the new Elf Lord or the new Goblin Lord. So here they both are at number 16, because I think that they're both really important in the upcoming standard if you want to play either of these tribal decks. Now, the Gobbo Lord is 4 mana, and that's way more expensive than any of us wanted it to be, but it's still going to see play in the upcoming standard, and could even see play in other formats, just because the ability to smash up artifacts for relatively cheap is what you want to be doing some of the time. Even in standard, by the way, where you can just sometimes trade a goblin for their Heart of Kirin, which is a pretty darn good trade a lot of the time. And as far as Clan Caller goes, I know this is a Chain Whirler meta, and it doesn't look super good as a 1-toughness Lord, but it's still going to see some play, right? I mean, it's a 2-mana Lord for the Elves deck. So again, even outside of Standard, there's probably going to be Elves players that want to play this. And the second bit of text on the card doesn't even have to be there. If this is just a 2-mana 1/1 Lord where all other Elves got +1/+1, it would probably see play in at least Standard, but the fact that this can, for a hefty price, go search up other copies of it is actually incredibly good. That's going to snowball quickly. Even though it's 6 mana, you're playing Elves, you're playing Mana Dorks, so it's not super hard to get to, and makes it a decent top deck. You know, if you get this on turn 6 or 7 and you get around to the next turn, you're almost certainly going to be able to call up another copy of it. The next turn, another copy. The next turn, another copy, until suddenly all your Elves have +4/+4 if you're able to keep the original copy out. It's just a lot I like about Clan Caller too. So even though these aren't the absolute best Lords we could have wanted, one's bad in the Chain Whirler meta, the other's a little bit too expensive, they're still going to see play almost definitely. Now, my number 15 is yet another tribal Lord, and it's not the last one we'll see on this list either. But I gotta shout out Valiant Knight, because this card looks really good to me. The Knight deck didn't necessarily need this, but it's definitely gonna take it. It follows up a history of Benelia like super well, and the ability to throw 5 mana into it and just give every one of your creatures double strike is obviously crazy. Plus, the creature's just naturally out of a Braid and Lightning Strike range. You have to revolt a Fatal Push to kill it. These are all things that matter an awful lot. Now, my number 14 is actually a reprint, and a really cheap one at that, but it's one that I think is going to have an awful lot of relevance in the standard format, at least for a couple of months, if nothing else. And that's Mentor of the Meek. While we have Oketra's Monument in the format, this is effectively going to be our Bygone Bishop. That's one of the reasons that that deck is just not as good as it used to be, is because Bygone Bishop was so crazy in that deck, and we don't have it anymore. Well, this is a way to, for an even cheaper cost, you know, it used to be 2 mana to crack a clue. Now just for 1 extra mana per creature, we can get a card, and it even works off of things like, you know, just monument tokens. That seems really, really good. So I like so much about Mentor of the Meek, I always have. And even though it is possible to get this shocked and lose some tempo on it, I think that the upside is just insanely high. And if Oketra's Monument still wants to be a deck for the next couple of months while it's still in Standard, Mentor of the Meek is going to be a key card in it. Now we're winding down on the tribal stuff that I think is good, but I still have a couple I want to talk about. So my number 13 is Dark Dweller Oracle. This is probably the best card we got to see printed for the Goblin deck out of the entirety of Core Set 2019. Sacrificing a creature to, quote, draw a card is a relatively steep cost, don't get me wrong, but it seems pretty decent if you're swinging in with goblins and they're going to die anyway to get card advantage off of them. That seems nice. Plus, if you're in a bad situation and you need to maybe draw that last burn spell, you can sacrifice a couple of goblins and try to get to that lightning strike. So there's just so much I like about this, especially considering, end of the day, it's a bear with upside. 2-mana 2/2s are not something we used to always see in red, especially ones that have real upside, and this definitely does. Now my number 12 is another one of these legendary Elder Dragons. It's Chromium the Mutable, which I think, personally, is just the best looking control finisher that we've had in literally years. It's got everything. It really just checks all of the boxes for an insane control finisher. Finishes the game in 3 bites, has flash, has flying, there's some form of evasion, has a form of hexproof you can give to it. That's unbelievable, and by the way, extra pro points if you can deal the last point of damage with an unblockable human Chromium. That seems fine too. So I just really don't understand why more people aren't going crazy over this card. I'm not saying it deserves to be $15 or anything, but it does deserve to be looked at as the best control finisher in the entire format for the next couple of years, and I just don't see why people aren't giving it its due credit. Again, just checks all the boxes for what you want out of a finisher. But my number 11 is finally the last tribal-only card that we'll talk about in this video, and it's Supreme Phantom. I think this is the best Lord in the set just because it may end up having the most real effect on a format. This will go into the Bant Spirits deck almost certainly, and it does some really important things there. Like you play it on turn 2, and then it sets your Spell Queller up to be unboltable, which is extremely, extremely important in that deck. So, if nothing else, I think that this is probably going to be the most impactful Tribal Lord we see in the set. And if in the next couple of standard sets we see a return to Spirit Tribal, this is obviously going to be important there. But we don't even have to see that. This is just good enough in a modern deck that's on the verge of being ridiculous. It might push it over into ridiculosity, so I gotta at least bring this card up. But let's start the top 10 here with the last reprint that made the list, and it's actually one of the more unassuming reprints, but I think this card is going to be really impactful for Standard, and that's Banefire. Now this gives decks playing Mountains a real tool against control decks, and I've seen a lot of people say like, oh, they just commit to memory your Banefire, yeah, and then they draw it again in a couple of turns. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is ridiculous against all the control decks in the format. And honestly, control decks are just about the only thing giving mono red and red black a run for their money. Right now, at least. That's going to change after rotation, I'm sure, but for the next few months, this is an incredibly important tool for red decks to get one over on control decks. So if for no other reason, I feel like it's got to make the list, but I've told you before, I'm a sucker for X spells. This is one of the best red X spells of all time, and I can't wait to play it. It goes good even outside of the sideboard of, you know, already popular red decks. I think this is pretty sweet in like the blue-red Mirari deck, you know, that's going to be fun in Standard. There's a lot of reasons that I want a big red X spell that can't be countered, and not all of those reasons include like, I want to be in control. Like, no, I just want a big red X spell. This is one of the best ones they could have given us, so it's number 10. Now, my number 9 is the Catman. It's a Johnny right here. And honestly, if there's anything that keeps Valiant Knight from seeing play as the 4-drop in the Knight deck, it's probably this. This looks really, really good in Black-White Knights, where it can bring back either Knight of Grace or Knight of Malice or any number of other things. You know, Dauntless Bodyguard after it's sacrificed to protect something. Just bring your bodyguard back and protect a different creature, or even the same creature over again. The first ability is really, really good too. I don't have to tell you that. Honestly, just making your creatures incrementally bigger is a lot better than it might look, and helps protect your Ajani in a way too. The ultimate, pretty fine, but honestly, it's the first two abilities I really want to talk about. I love that this Planeswalker has reanimation on it, and it's a white Planeswalker. That seems pretty neat. Haven't seen white be able to reanimate stuff in too long. That used to be a thing white was able to do. And even though it's only converted mana cost 2 or less creatures, that's still really good. That's a lot better than it looks at first glance. So there's so much I like about the Sajani. Even though it doesn't traditionally protect itself in the ways that I want, it still sort of protects itself and provides card advantage in a way by bringing creatures back from your graveyard. And if your deck is built around really, really good 2-drops, like a Hate Bears deck, then this card is obviously ridiculous at the 4-drop slot, so I think it's going to see some play. Now, my number 8 is a card that almost made the sleepers list, but I think there's just enough people who understand how good Psy Master Thopterist actually is. At least for the next few months while Kaladesh block is still in standard, this card looks really, really good to me, especially alongside things like Mox Amber. This is yet another thing to enable Mox Amber if you felt like we didn't already have enough pieces, which I guess a lot of people feel like we don't. But in any case, obviously you play your Psy and you play your Mox Amber, you get yourself a free Thopter, and now you can tap that Mox Amber for blue mana. That seems decent right there, but it's good with all of the other artifacts in this format, and there are a metric ton of good artifacts people are playing, and getting extra value in the form of flying creatures seems really, really good to me, not to mention the fact that this is outside of Lightning Strike and a Braid range, and even Bolt range in Modern, which might be really important. Anytime, you know, a creature that provides this much extra value is out of Bolt range, it's worth at least bringing up that fact when it comes to Modern play. But just in Standard, this outlives a ton of a very important removal and provides real value for you over the course of a game. If you just get 1 or 2 extra Thopters off of this, it's unbelievable. We already play stuff like Pia Nalar, you know, and we played cards like Pia in the past, and this has the ability to incrementally be way better than Pia. It doesn't provide that sort of enter the battlefield value, which has always been one of the best parts of PNLR, but it can provide way more value over the course of a game than a card like Pia can, and that's really, really worth paying a lot of attention to. I like a lot about Psy. Again, it doesn't have to fill your board with flying Thopters. It can just give you 2 or 3, and that's good enough. Again, we play Pia. We play Whirler Virtuoso, and in a lot of ways, I feel like this card is better than either one of those. Now, all the way down here at number 7 is Graveyard Marshal. This is seriously, to my mind, one of the best cards in the entire set, and I've heard plenty of people say this is going to be good in Zombie Tribal, but bunk that. This is good in just about any deck that can make 2 black mana on turn 2. Because a 2 mana 3/2 are fine stats. That's really decent to me. Crew's Heart of Kiran, by the way, early in the game. That's one of the reasons 2 mana 3/2s are pretty good sometimes, is the ability to crew a heart early. That's going to matter for the next few months. Instant speed board presence is always good too. There's just so much to love about this card. You know, it's aggressively costed in the first place. You don't even have to get any extra value out of it for it to be a valuable card. But the moment you get any extra value out of it, it's gone way above and beyond, and it's probably going to end up replacing Scrap Heap Scrounger once the format rotates, and may even be in the same decks as Scrap Heap to help crew up a Heart of Kiran. So I just love a lot about this card. I think there's plenty to talk about when it comes to Marshall, even just outside of a zombie deck. You know, this just looks good in any deck that can fit it reliably. So I love this card. I really think it's easily in the top 10. But my number 6 is Cleansing Nova, and I don't think we'll see this card right away. Might have to wait on Fumigate to rotate, but there's plenty of players talking about a 2-1 split with Fumigate, because in the upcoming format, there are obviously going to be some artifact decks. Not just because of Psy and a couple of other cards that work with artifacts, but my number 1 card on this list is going to make artifact decks super playable for at least the next couple of months. So you might want the flexibility of being able to destroy all artifacts if they don't have a whole bunch of creatures out. You know, same thing with enchantments. There's a bunch of enchantments in this format, like Seal Away, Cast Out, Ixalan's Binding, History of Benalia, sometimes Antiquity's War. Like, there's a ton of enchantments that people are playing right now, so the flexibility this card provides is actually really important. I like the fact that there are some decks, combo decks, artifact-based decks, that this card would sometimes be dead against, because those decks just don't play a whole bunch of creatures. But your 5-mana sweeper can actually be online against decks that would normally be dead against, and I think that's a huge bonus. Now, my number 5 is a card that I'm a little surprised made it all the way up this list. It's going to be true of number 4, too, by the way. There are some cards in this set that I didn't expect to be so far up, but they're just undeniably good. So, number 5 is Runic Armasaur. Card is just unbelievable in multiple formats. Against Standard, this really helps out against Walking Ballista. It's going to be almost impossible for them to ping a Runic Armasaur to death. If they want to ping anything else with Walking Ballista, it's going to cost them a card per activation, which is unbelievable. That's pretty good. You know, a 2/5 is decent for 3 mana by itself. That's not a bad body. It blocks all day against aggro decks, you know. Doesn't die to most of their stuff. Doesn't die to just about any red removal, so it's just decent against them. If they want to activate their Hazoret for that little bit of reach, you know, well, you get to draw a card. They want to, you know, get rid of their Bomat Courier and draw, well, we get to draw too. If they want to, you know, sacrifice a Fanatical Firebrand if they're playing that card, well, we get to draw a card for that. So there's just so many things this hoses. In Standard alone, not to mention Modern, where if they want to crack a fetch, you draw a card, and that's good enough by itself. But we made it to number 4. Again, another card I didn't expect to be all the way up here on the list. It's just undeniably ridiculous. That's Remorseful Cleric. Well, this is just a home run in terms of playability, and it's going to see play in multiple formats. This is yet another card that seems really good in the Banned Spirits deck and is at least going to be in the 75. It might go in the sideboard, where it's better than Rest in Peace. You know, it's a body, fits with your tribal theme, love everything about it in that deck, but it may also be playable in Standard. You know, Blue-White Godpharaoh's Gift might want this for the mirror match. That doesn't seem bad. You can wipe their graveyard and then bring this back as a 4/4 flyer. That's okay, but it also plays pretty well against Godpharaoh's Gift decks, and the Scarab God, and Liliana, and all manner of graveyard shenanigans like Scrap Heap Scrounger and stuff. So this is going to see play in multiple formats, so it should be way up the list, and it is. But we're into the top 3 now, and let's crack the top 3 with a card you've probably been waiting on the entire time. It's Resplendent Angel, kids. It's finally here, and yes, I think this card is the real deal. That's why it's all the way up my list here. I think this card is just good for Standard, period. It's got decent stats, obviously. A 3-mana 3/3 flyer is nothing to sneeze at. I don't know why people are saying that's bad. That's good. You're forcing your opponent to have the Abrade of the Lightning Strike or the Cruelable Heart of Kiran to knock this out of the sky. If they don't have those things, they're gonna take 3 or 6 damage pretty quickly, and there's not much they can do about it. And that 3, 6, or even 9 damage that early can really help you close a game out when it comes to the later game. So the card is great in that respect. Just the stats are right for Standard, even if there was no other text. But there is other text, so it makes the card snowball amazingly in the late game if they can't kill it. By the time you can pump the mana into it, they're going to have a real problem on their hands, and it's a fine top deck for that reason too. You get this later on in the game, turn 9, turn 10. It's just crazy when you untap the next turn with it. You just can immediately start pumping mana into it and making angels. That's one of the things I really like about this card, is that it's self-sufficient. People are talking about building whole decks around it, and yeah, you want to live the dream and go like turn 2 Metallic Mimic, turn 3 Resplendent Angel, turn 4 Shalai, turn 5 Lyra. Everyone wants to do that, but again, the card doesn't need a tribal aspect in order to be good. It doesn't need to be built around. It's self-sufficient. You know, the fact that you pump mana into it and it will create angels if it does combat damage that turn, really crazy. And even if you only ever create 1 angel while this is on board, it got you a dangerous amount of value. So I just think they obviously pushed this card as hard as they could for Standard play, and it's gonna see some. But we made it to number 2, and you knew he had to show up eventually. Here's Nicky B. Nicol Bolas is easily my number 2, if not my number 1. And this is another one of those cards that people are like, I don't know. But honestly, you guys, people are focusing way too much on the flipped half of this, the transformed half of this. If you only focus on the first half, it's a 4-mana 4/4 flyer, which are almost acceptable stats in Standard, but the Enter the Battlefield trigger is what I'm really digging on this card. It's basically a 2-for-1. I mean, it's not Ravenous Chupacabra, obviously, but you're still getting a creature on board and forcing them to get rid of a card. So it is effectively a 2-for-1 in creature form, which is more than good enough. But if you ever get it flipped, it's obviously righteous. Every single ability on the Planeswalker half of this is game-breaking and plays well with each other, you know? You can kill a Planeswalker with one of his abilities and then resurrect that Planeswalker with another one of his abilities. Not to mention his ultimate is literally you win the game. Card is just unbelievable even if you never flip it, and when you do flip it, it's out of this freaking world. It's gonna see some standard play. It might even resurrect a Grixis mid-range deck by itself. It easily deserves a top 3 slot to me. But finally, number 1, and you knew it had to come to this, Tezzeret. For the next few months before fall rotation hits and we still have Kaladesh and Aether Revolt in the format, this is just an absolutely bonkers card because of the 0 ability. It's going to be so easy to draw 2 cards off of this that it's dumb. And you don't even have to sacrifice any loyalty to draw 2 cards off of it. That's just crazy. You know, everyone's talked about you follow up Karn with this, and it's just unbelievable. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good enough to me. It's a blue-based artifact, probably blue-black artifact tech. Looks to be poised really, really well in the upcoming format, just because Karn into Tezzeret looks ridiculous. And the 0 ability, even though it's getting all the attention right now, is not the only good ability on this Planeswalker. Obviously, you know, the first ability is insane too. That's also a pretty desirable thing to be able to do. Plus, the ultimate is nuts if you can get to it. It doesn't necessarily say you win the game, but if you get a couple of turns with it, tutoring up anything you want and playing it for free is freaking stupid. So I just don't see why anyone could have a problem with this Planeswalker. And most people don't. For the first time in a while, this is a card that almost everyone agrees is very, very good. There's the occasional person that's like, explain why this card is good. It's good. Trust me, it's a 5-mana Planeswalker, and that's the only drawback to it. It's got a really high starting loyalty, especially if you +1 it. It's got a way to protect itself by making a Flying Thopter. That's fine, that can block for it. Or it can just win the game off of Thopters eventually. That seems good too. It's got a way to draw not only a card, which is something that you want, especially for 0 loyalty, but it can draw 2 cards for 0 loyalty. That's busted. And again, the ultimate is just really good when you finally get to it. So even if you just sit back on this thing and make Thopters all day, that's pretty good. Like, everything about this Walker seems unbelievable to me and a large portion of the community. And there's a reason that the card has reached $25, $30 on TCG Player. It is that good looking to a vast majority of standard players. So there's a reason this card is number 1. I wouldn't have it any other way. So that's my list, and honestly, Core Set looks so good. There were a bunch of other cards I wanted to bring up, just didn't, have space for on the list. This was almost a top 25 because, obviously I didn't bring up Nexus of Fate. Probably going to get it in the comments section for that, but unlike some mostly casual players, I don't really see how this card is like super nuts. 7 mana is an awful lot. For my money, I'd rather bring up Dismissive Pyromancer. Pyromancer looks unbelievable to me, but I didn't quite have room on my list. I even like Palaka Worm. It looks like a really good reprint to me right now. There's just so many good cards in this set that I just didn't have room to talk about all the cards I think are ridiculous. Although I guess I just did, so there's that. But in any case, I'm tapped out for this one, so now it's your turn. Take to the comments section. Let me know how you felt about the list, how you'd order your list, or things I left off of my list that you'd want on yours. Just really challenge me down there in the comments section. Let me know how much of a dum-dum I am. So do all that stuff, plus the YouTube stuff. Like the video if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new because it's almost deck tech season and you probably want to see the decks. It's kind of what we're known for around here. So subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications if you want to do that. And don't scratch right next to the microphone, buddy. Don't scratch right next to the microphone. That's a silly bub. But anyway, this is Ziggy, you guys. I know you haven't seen him in forever. And he's so fat now. He's fatter than me, or at least he will be before too long. That's right. Boy, I'm sorry, boy. I didn't mean to make fun of you. But anyway, do all the other stuff. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Throw me $1 on patreon.com/SBMTG. Link in the description for that. Or if you really want to help me out, click the first link in the description. That'll take you over to TCG Player. They help sponsor your boys' content, and they're good to me. They help keep the lights on around here. And they also happen to be the cheapest place you can pre-order any of these cards or even sealed product. They have the cheapest price for pre-order on booster boxes for Core Set right now. And all of the prices that I use in this video are from TCG Player. So if any of them look like good prices to you, head on over to that link. But that's it for now, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the list and the kitty cat, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.